Now, we come to the last item on the governing body agenda, which is confidential C1, which is the approval of the adoption of the consultation material for the emergency budget, annual budget 2020-2021. This contains information that needs to be discussed under confidentiality. So I'll move that the public be excluded from this part of the agenda. Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Second, if so.
Seconded by Councillor Collins. I'll put that resolution.
Can I just ask a question on that, Mr. Mayor, please?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah. So just in terms of procedure, I appreciate a little clarification. We discussed in the emergency committee in confidential all the matters to do with the consultation document. I understand that. We had the confidential section in the emergency budget today, which was agreed upon that document going out. We're now we're in governing body, we're going into confidential for this item, which the document is to be released tomorrow. In normal circumstances, that sequence of events would result in this being heard in the open meeting. So I don't quite understand why we're going into confidential to approve a document we've already approved in emergency and which is being released to the public tomorrow. Could someone please explain that to me?
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Watson. I'll ask Kevin Ramsey to speak to that, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. What we have to do is carefully control this to ensure that we do meet our statutory obligations for the New Zealand Stock Exchange as well as the Overseas Exchange. So there'll be a disclosure committee after this meeting, and that'll weigh up the points you've actually now reached and assess whether we have to do a exchange release of any sort. After that, there will then be the noon tomorrow. We'll be publicly releasing anything anyway. As far as the documentations, the consultation documents supporting information will become available too. So this is purely to meet the stock exchange requirements to ensure that we manage the release of any confidential or interest or information of interest to the market.
Your Worship, can I ask a question, please?
Yep, Councillor Simpson.
So my question is, I understand that, or I understood that till I opened the Herald this morning, and surely most of the information that we're consulting on is being covered in public now. I mean, we're aware of the information, so why can't it be public now? I just need some clarity.
Absolutely not, because I looked at the Herald article this morning too, and it doesn't refer to any of the items that might need to be disclosed to the New Zealand Stock Exchange. There are no figures, no information that has been improperly released in any of the comments made by Kevin, myself, or by other councillors that were interviewed for that.
Yes. And yeah, if I can just add to that, Your Worship, and the information that was released there was actually preceded by a stock exchange release which referred purely to the size of the revenue gap. None of the information around the possible mitigations, which is being discussed there, and how that's going to be presented to the public has been picked up by any of the media yet, because that has not been released, and that'll be released at noon tomorrow. How we're going to address that revenue gap, what are the mitigations, what are the options available that we wish to hear from our public on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I've got two other. Sorry, Councillor Watson, you've got a further question?
Yeah. So without labouring the point, Mr. Mayor, when we go out for annual plans or long-term plans, that final approval appears in the governing body in open. In these circumstances, I understand what's being said. It's going out anyway in less than 24 hours. Would it not have been possible to prepare, given that it's been fairly clear that it was going to be approved, a simultaneous release to cover that obligation? So then we could have had this in the open meeting, prior to it being publicised. I guess what I'm saying, Mr. Mayor, it really denies the elected representatives then, the ability to make comments that they may think appropriate for the public prior to seeing that document. So in essence, the document itself appears for the public without the benefit of elected representatives making any points of view if they choose to
I'll
do so.
come to Kevin in just a second. My understanding is that it's not appropriate for officials to release to the stock exchange something that hasn't been formally passed yet by the governing body. But Kevin, would you like to comment further on that?
Exactly, Your Worship, and it's also the comment that Councillor Simpson made earlier. The time constraints this time is quite different. Normally we have that week between, so we understand the decisions you've made and what is going to be presented. We can consider that and have an opportunity then to come back in the governing body for the final adoption and actually make the decision. There's usually a week between. Today we did not know if there was going to be any conversation today, any decisions made which would alter what we're about to disclose tomorrow. There just was not time to actually have that intermediary step that you've referred to. It's down to time constraints again.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin. I have questions from, first of all, Councillor Al Filipaina.
Thank you, Your Worship. That's the reason why I asked the question of clarification earlier, because there were comments being made about the consultation document on the item that related to the rates and fees. All our consultation that we have had around the consultation document, as well as the supporting information, have been in confidential. So at what stage, and not talking about the information that relates to the communication with the stock exchange, but at what stage do we as governing body approve the material in the consultation document and supporting documents that we've discussed all in confidential? At what stage do we have the opportunity? Well, when do we approve that? And my understanding is it has to be approved in public for that document to go out, except for the information that Kevin's talking about.
Yeah.
So when will that happen?
That happens right now. As soon as we conclude this item, that means that we have approved the material under confidential for consultation. As Kevin said, there'll be a disclosure committee. They will consider whether anything further needs to be disclosed to the New Zealand Stock Exchange as per the requirements on us. And the document, I'm imagining, will be released either tomorrow morning or sometime early in the day tomorrow. And obviously that then is in the public arena, not simply the consultation document, but also the supporting information. So all of the information that we have relied on to make our decisions, or the decision we're about to make, will be out in the public, so that the public will understand what we have considered prior to the release of this consultation document. Kevin, anything further you would like to add to that? Sorry, I don't know whether it's
Sorry, no, that was human error there on my part. I had the mute on.
It's okay.
Sorry, no, that's right. Just the one possible exception is if there's been conversations during the workshops related to things like commercially sensitive, such as the value of properties to be sold or anything like that. Those little snippets will be held confidential still. But generally, everything else you said is correct. Once the disclosure committee works its way through whether a New Zealand Stock Exchange release is needed, we then release all of the consultation documents, supporting information, noon tomorrow.
Okay,
that's right.
And the supporting information that we're releasing is the document that's in front of us now. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
So, Your Worship, sorry, just a supplementary, because I need to get it square in my head. So once we end up approving this confidential, it doesn't need to go back into the public of the agenda for the governing body for us to make that approval, because that is what normally happens when we end up talking about issues in confidential that we have approved. It goes back into open and public arena for us to approve that publicly, because going to Councillor Watson's point, there will be no acknowledgement of our staff and the work they've done publicly. So that's what I'm hearing is the process now that is followed as a result of the COVID-19 and the Emergency Committee. Am I correct in saying that it doesn't need to go back into the public agenda of the governing body for us to approve publicly?
That's correct, but I'll ask Kevin if there's any further comment he'd like to make on that.
No, that's correct. The governing body must make the decision as to what will be released for consultation. It just so happens this time it isn't confidential because of our time constraints. If there is going to be a future restatement, then that's an opportunity to add any additional resolutions you may wish to do.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think that's wrong, but look, I stand corrected.
Okay, I'm relying on the advice of somebody that's obviously been through this process quite a lot. Right, I have another question from Councillor Wayne Walker.
A general question first, Kevin. Would we be one of the few councils in New Zealand that is having to deal with confidentiality because of stock exchange requirements?
It'll be any councils that have shares issued on the exchange would have to go through the same process and assess the nature of what they're doing and whether the press releases are being done versus stock exchange releases. Yep, it'll be those councils, which are relatively few.
Thank you, Councillor Walker.
And the particular shares that we're talking about that go to Auckland Council are what?
Well, we talk about the share. It's bonds that we've issued on the public market or other forms. So it's actually what's been recognised on the stock exchange. I see John Bishop was going to talk just then through the chair. If it's okay, John, maybe want to elaborate on that.
John, would you like to comment on that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. So look, just to expand on that answer, the two other councils which have listed bonds are Christchurch City Council through Christchurch Holdings, and also Quayside Holdings, which is, I think, owned by a couple of councils in the Bay of Plenty. And also the LGFA, they have listed bonds as well.
Okay, so my further question, given that I'm supposing that we're going to continue to be active in the bond market, is there a facility that we can put in place where we can separate out those things that go to the bond market that may upset the issues there, so that the bulk of the budget we can deal with in public? Otherwise, we're going to be constantly in virtual confidential around matters, many of which are in the public interest, leading up to approving the budget.
Yep. Perhaps if I pick that up through you, the chair.
Kevin.
Yeah, look, if there is more time allowed for within the process, then you could have a process which involves the Disclosure Committee assessing what is going to be discussed and whether any of that would be of interest to bondholders, and then making that call to be made. So yeah, look, we can consider that and look at that in the process where we have more time rather than the time constraints we have for this particular round. We'll look at those options, Councillor Walker.
Can I make the request that we do that in the future? We know well in advance what the issues are that go to the bond market, and I wouldn't have thought it was too difficult to separate that out. So I understand the haste, but I also understand a high degree of predictability around this and the opportunity to plan in advance. I would suggest the most important test for us is around public transparency.
Okay, can I just make a comment here, please, Councillor? This is an emergency budget. Hopefully we won't be doing one of these every year. If we are, I think our finance team will be looking for alternative careers because the strain will be too great. In an emergency situation like this, we've had to do things slightly differently. But about transparency, look, within 24 hours, all of the material will be out in both the consultation document and the supporting information document. The process will be totally transparent, and councillors will have the opportunity both to acknowledge the work done by our officers, because I think that was a point Councillor Watson made, but also to comment on where we've got to and why we've put this document out for consultation in the form that it is. So there'll be plenty of opportunity. All we've got to do is just have that brief period where our Disclosure Committee makes sure that we're doing things that we are required under law to do and not in breach of any of our obligations. So that's quite important, but from this time tomorrow, everybody, this will be in the public arena. The media will be commenting on it. They'll probably be asking you for your comments on it, and you'll be free to make your comments, as I will be. Okay, so I think where we got to, if there's no further questions, we're about to put the resolution that we move into confidential. It's been moved and seconded, if I recall rightly. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 To the contrary, no. Carried. Now comes the difficult part. We now have to a 2-minute break, and we are going to a different. No, we're staying exactly where we are. So just a 2-minute break to ensure that we have the confidential connection. So if you could make a cup of tea in 2 minutes, please do so. I'll come back to you very shortly. Thank you.